My name is Brandon Brown. I became interested in HT whenever it came down for me to transfer. And what drew me to HT was the size, the history, the culture. You know, I really felt as though it being a small HBCU that administrators and teachers would take a personal interest in me. You know, they would truly help me out if I ever needed it. And I felt like I could make an immediate impact right away. Paying for an education was definitely a concern. So joining ROTC was something that was big because I knew it would help with my education and help fund it pretty much. Because, you know, these days college isn't cheap, unfortunately.
My name is Brittany White. I'm a Mellon Fellow, and I'm also on the Honda All-Star Campus Challenge team. I'm a history major, and I'm an African Studies minor. Houston-Tillotson has been a great environment for me, and I'm very, very glad that my grandmother told me about this institution because it fits exactly what I was looking for, a school that had a small community and faculty and staff that really support the students so that you can achieve all of the dreams you want to achieve, all the goals, and all the things you never thought you could get in life. It's very important for people to support universities like Houston-Tillotson so that we will be able to achieve our goals without having to worry about how we're going to be able to go to school next semester. So it is tremendous to support universities like this.
Hi, and welcome to Civil Society. I'm your host, Julie Niehoff, and today our topic is Black Life in Central Texas. My first guest is Dr. Colette Burnett, president of Houston-Tillotson University. It's a private, historically black university located right here in Austin, Texas. And in fact, it was the first institution of higher learning to be located in Austin, which makes it a perfect place to start our conversation. So welcome, Dr. Burnett. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here.
Thank you for joining me today. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the role of Houston-Tillotson, not just for your students and your staff and your faculty, but for the overall community that you're serving here in Central Texas. And that means not even just Austin, but Central Texas in general.
Mm-hmm. I've been in the position close to 2 years now, and I love the way that Austin and the Central Texas region embraces Houston-Tillotson. There's a true recognition of the role that we play in the community, the roots that we have in the community, the culture that we bring to the community. My students are residents of 78702, so that adds some vibrancy to the community in East Austin. And I live, work, and play in East Austin. I'm very proud of Houston-Tillotson and the role that it plays.
Wonderful.
We are, a jewel in the violet crown of Austin.
And it is a beautiful campus. So
oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I understand that the UNCF, which is the United Negro College Fund, reports that 70% of black doctors in America and 50% of black engineers actually come from predominantly black universities. So I wanted to know if that is something that your school strives for. Are you focused on science? Are you focused on STEM?
We are. First of all, I want to say historically black colleges historically built the middle class of black middle class. Black colleges were founded at a time when blacks couldn't go to majority schools. So the majority of the individuals that got their education were coming from black colleges. And then with the onslaught of integration, therefore clearly it changed, but we built the middle class. And there's still a role that we play for all people because the face of the marginally underserved or the face of individuals that just need to have different choices, that has not changed in the nation. So with respect to STEM, I'm an engineer, so I have a natural affinity. I went to a majority institution undergrad, but I have an affinity for this. It wasn't called STEM when I came out of
that
undergrad.
Is pretty new.
But
can we say what STEM is?
Sure, science, technology, engineering, and math. And now some people actually refer to it as STEAM, where you add the A for arts.
Oh, nice.
So on the campus, as you know, having a female engineering a president that's a female engineer, we have a tagline called #IamThePipeline, because you often hear people say that there aren't enough people of color in the pipeline to fill positions, especially in tech spaces, tech companies. And I feel differently about that. I don't think people have the will to really look to fill those positions with people of color. So we were trying to elevate the fact that we have close to 200 graduates every year here in Central Texas that are more than adequately prepared to move into those spaces and to do a very good job.
Well, I love to hear that. In fact, when I was preparing for talking to you, I was reading, a lot on this topic. And one thing that I learned was that in cities where there's a lot of either there's socioeconomic differences where, you know, not all people are living in the same areas, not all people are doing the same kinds of jobs. That in cities like Austin that are known as high tech or have a high tech growth market, that it's more likely that fewer Black people will live there. Have you heard that?
Anecdotally, yes.
So I feel like the work you're doing may be actually changing that. Is that?
I'm highly encouraged that it is. Back to the United Negro College Fund, the university was just awarded a $1 million grant over 4 years called the Career Pathways Initiative. And in that initiative is designed to bring students of color, or students, but clearly students of color in this particular case for Houston-Tillotson, into as freshmen. And we have a computer science component of it. So bring them in as freshmen, and we're partnering with companies across the city, from the Austin Statesman all the way to robotic companies in the area, the Austin Rodeo. We're working to have them as a partner, so that because these are kind of non-traditional spaces, and you move for people of color, and you move them through their term, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, all the way to graduation into an actual career. So these are, they have a mentor, they actually started their own company. The university, we have a hackathon, we call it Div Hackathon. It's the only hackathon totally put on in the nation by students of color. So we really are pushing for students, because sometimes they're consumers of it and they don't see themselves as producers of it.
Well,
and it's really exposure.
And how often do we say it starts with education? So I love that you're taking it from beginning at education all the way to career and a livelihood. That's wonderful. I only have a little bit more time just with you, so I want to point out that you are a co-chair, and I'm going to read it because it's a complicated name, but you're co-chair of the Mayor's Task Force on Institutional Racism and System Inequities. And you co-chaired with Dr. Cruz, who is the superintendent of Austin Independent School District. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Of course. I personally and professionally grew from it. I shared yesterday, we presented it in a work session with the City Council, and I was really humbled and honored to be able to serve in that role. When the mayor first asked me to do it, my first inclination was to say no, but I would have been a hypocrite, because I am always saying how people need to actually move things to action and have the will to do the hard work.
I'm so glad that you did it, and we will talk a little bit about the report that came out of that when we're going to bring some panelists in. So as recently as 2014, Austin was rated the 10th most segregated city in America. And in 2015, the Martin Prosperity Institute named Austin the most economically segregated metro area in America. As it turns out, Texas is well represented on that list. San Antonio ranks number 3, Houston number 4, and Dallas is number 7 of the 10 most economically segregated cities in the nation. Dr. Burnett and I are now joined by Dr. Stephanie Hawley, Associate Vice President, Office of Equity and Inclusion for Austin Community College, and Tam Hawkins, President of the Greater Austin Black Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, ladies. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So Dr. Burnett and I were just talking about the task force that she was co-chair of. That task force talked about education, real estate, housing, health, finance, and criminal justice. Can you solve all that in the 15 minutes that we have together?
I wish I could, Julie.
I wish we could even talk about all of it. We can't, and we will continue the conversation online after the show. But I do want to touch on a couple of things. Health. Are you educating people in health sciences?
We have some allied health fields, yes.
And ACC, I know, does as well. And Tam, I know that you and the Chamber, you're working in economic development focused on the Black community.
Absolutely.
Is that a good way to say that?
That's an excellent way. What I say is that economies don't happen in vacuums.
Economies don't happen in vacuums. I like that. I like that very much. So how are you doing that with the Chamber? And do you ever work with educational organizations to do that as well?
Absolutely, in a myriad of ways. Dr. Burnett, I'm proud to say, sits on our board actually, and an excellent board member. And we also host events at ACC, at HT, and make certain that we are engaged, our ears to the ground, that we are a resource for them, for their talent pool and these young minds that they're educating, and making certain that they're a viable workforce for Austin.
Okay, so that's sort of a public-private, well, in your case it's a private university, but a public and private combination working together to what? Well, how would you characterize that effort?
To achieve a common goal of making certain that, you know, Austin gets this moniker of being the best city in several different lists, but making certain that we continue on an upward trajectory and trend of making certain that we have people that are employable.
Sure.
And that takes public-private partnerships. It takes all of us looking and forecasting and making certain that we can see, down the road 10, 15 years from now.
Because I hear so much, Austin is a great city to live, best city to have a business, best city to grow your family, all of those things. But to hear that we are socioeconomically segregated more than any other city was disappointing for me to hear it, but also jarring. And I know that in your work at ACC, you're working not just to change that, because clearly all of you are working to change that, but you're talking about beneath that, the language behind and the systems behind that. Can you talk a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, one of the things that we are trying to do with our new Office of Equity and Inclusion is to make sure we're engaging the community, because one of the things we know about this divide that you're talking about, it doesn't change without some deliberate and intentional dialogue. And unfortunately, most of us have never learned how to talk about race.
It's a hard thing to talk about.
Exactly. And so one of the things that our office tries to do is to give people the tools and the equipment. We recently had a summit where we brought together the community, almost 400 people, to talk about race and to get tools to help galvanize our leadership, to have those conversations, because as you mentioned, language, and as Tam just mentioned about those public-private partnerships, all those things are important, because we won't change that divide unless we can actually sit down and learn how to build relationships and to actually look at the data and the evidence.
Give me like an example of what you mean by tools.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that's kind of the bedrock of the work that we're doing with this new office that just opened September 1st is we're using the Aspen Institute's 10 lessons for taking leadership for racial equity. And that's a tool that almost anybody from any organization, any agency can use. And what it does is from thousands of conversations and interviews, they've come up with ways that organizations can simply make space to have conversations about race. Also making sure that people start with data, start with evidence, because one of the reasons, and data are tools, because that's how you start the conversation. Because
and base it in reality.
Exactly.
Yes,
so when you say tools, data are tools that we use to say, here are the gaps. And we also talk about making sure we use what we call disaggregated data, which means you break the data down, because right now, I love what you were saying about we're one of the best cities to live in, but for whom?
Yes, and actually Tam and I were just talking about that before we came on set, that I was talking about, the differences in where people live, and that you can click through maps online and show this year it's this way, this year it's this way, and over time it's really gone the opposite direction that most other big cities in America have gone, where usually the black population has moved toward the center of the city. This is just data, this is an opinion. And then now in Austin, for some reason, they move out of the city to the suburbs. Can you talk about that, either of you?
Sure. Part of it is it's an affordability factor, and that goes into so many different realms, right? And so that's education and seeking better opportunity for their children. That is transportation. That is in being able to get back and forth from work and just live in an area that they find palatable for their finances.
Okay.
And so,
when I read that, I'm sorry to interrupt you. When I read that 7% of Austin residents are African American, is that a real stat? Because is that just Austin proper, or is that including the suburbs where I'm reading a lot of African Americans are choosing to go?
I was going to say, I've seen 7%, I've seen 9%, I've seen those data be argued. Does it really matter?
That's a good question.
Because whether it's 7 or 9, the concern is that it's a prosperous city, and there is a something is happening when it comes to African Americans and their presence in Austin.
Yes,
so
that is the trend line.
Right,
yes.
So that's a symptom of a much larger problem. And the task force, those are twin evils, institutional racism and systemic inequities. And the task force, I'm proud of the work, and Committed Citizens did the working groups, two which are here with you here with us today on different working groups. But I think the point being that we need to figure out how that's happening and why that's happening. And the lack of tools was one of the findings, because we don't really have a good tool to assess it, and it removes the emotion from it, and it looks at it from a very data factual way.
That
and
is
people
my
respond to
favorite
that.
thing about data. It removes assumption and emotion from decision making, or it can help do that. That's never something we can do in difficult or complicated issues. Like, this is a complicated issue.
It's a very hard conversation.
It is. I read in the Aspen Institute's report that you shared, and we'll share that on the website as well so people can read that change requires the conscious interruption of the status quo. And I read over some of the notes from the report that your task force did, and that looks like a lot of disruption to the status quo, or at least suggestions for disruption. Where do you think the best use of disruption is?
So I'm going to be really simple here. I mean, there's many things, but you have to be intentional about your purchasing power. So one of the easiest things you can do.
Oh, I didn't even, that's not something that occurred to me.
I mean, that's something anyone can do. You can do it right now. You can be more positive and say, you know what, I want my dollars to go here. If you know that Austin is the most socioeconomically challenged city in all of America, seek out those opportunities to patronize people that don't necessarily look like you.
I love
You be
that.
the change you wish to see.
Do you have programs or are you having any events that talk about that kind of solution?
We do. We have our State of Black Business, which goes over data. Austin actually does, it fares better than some of the other cities in Texas. We're the most profitable for the Black entrepreneur here. We outnumber our counterparts 3-to-1 in retail sector. And so we go over data every year and analyze what's going on at a city level and a regional level as well as state level. And then we have our state of education, which I'm happy to report has been at ACC. And this year it's moving to HT and back home. And we go over data on what's going on in education. So those are the tools that we try to empower the city with to make conscious decisions based off of data.
And then a fun activity, the Taste of Black Austin, just to lift the awareness.
Taste of Black Austin.
Taste of Black Austin is an incredible, incredible event for us that really explored food and the cultural pathways of food from a historical context. And we spanned from 1865 to present day. We were able to understand that there were 21 Black-owned restaurants in 1865 in Austin proper.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just some, and just really looking at things and connecting it through a different lens.
Okay. So in part of the Aspen report that I was reading that you and I discussed, it actually said data's not enough. There has to be a will to have the conversation.
Absolutely.
And talk about how your role came about at ACC and the growth of that kind of conversation.
Absolutely. Our president had the vision to know that if we were going to change anything, if we're going to change those outcomes, that there had to be some entity within the college that had a global scope on what things were going on. And our office is very different from a lot of equity and diversity offices. Many equity and diversity offices have portfolios of programs. What we do is look at institutional factors. We look at our leadership development, our data use. We look at how are we preparing people to be culturally proficient, because you can stare at the data all day long.
Sure.
However, if you don't understand the dominant cultural norms that cause us to make the decisions that we make that result in those divides and those results, you'll keep making decisions that keep giving you the same results. So as our president really started looking at disaggregated data from the time he came to the institution a few years ago, and we started, we knew that something different had to happen, and not just looking at the data and not just blaming the students and saying, let's put in another program.
Or really blaming any one person.
Exactly. So it's not a blame and shame game.
Yeah. It's an ingredients to this cake that we're all baking.
Right. And we've all got to come together. The data is the start. You start with the evidence, but then you equip people by making sure they have opportunities for professional development so they can go, and you can't workshop away institutional racism. However, it's a developmental process. It's a developmental process. So people have to engage in multiple opportunities to learn. And the other piece is we have to understand history. And a lot of times people want to have truth and reconciliation without the truth. And we have to go back. In Austin, we have to go back to those 1928 race codes that started this thing off. And so part of it is will, but we do have to have history, and we do have to have what I call sustained momentum. And that's what the power of what's going on with the Mayor's Task Force, with the City of Austin, with Austin Community College, and many other groups, is we're sustaining the conversation.
collaboration.
One thing that's important to point out is that Dr. Rhodes used his sphere of influence to affect change in his organization. And it's what Tam was saying earlier about you make a decision as an individual how you're going to take action. So he had the courage to do that, and it takes courage as a leader. And in the case of the mayor, it takes courage to say intentionally, I want to do something to move the needle, because it is a journey. So leaders such as Dr. Rhodes that take that step and say, my organization needs to do something and take action.
Well, I feel like those are good examples too, to say it's not just Black African American citizens who are going to take up the flag and make changes. It's all of us, you know, any race, religion, creed, that wants to change those ingredients, or at least see some of the ingredients taste tested, and let's say, can we make a better cake? I love that. I love the stat you shared about the Black businesses doing better than other cities with Black businesses, but I'd rather we find a way that you're not even having to measure that anymore.
Absolutely, or that number grows and there's more of them.
Yeah, and which your school is helping, and all of your programs, not just students, but community activism is helping. And I know that you're working with people who are in their professions and actually possibly reaching down and bringing interns in and mentoring as well. So all of that is valuable and important. And I hope that you feel like you've got a voice and can share anything with us that we can put on the website. I do want to share on the website some of the history that you're talking about, because in preparing for this, I did not know the history of I-35, and there's a lot that a lot of citizens of Austin and Central Texas do not realize about our city's history. Okay, I appreciate your time today.
I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
We are out of time today, but I want to close with the idea that we can and should keep this conversation going. An open dialogue with the common interest in a better life for all people of Central Texas, and an honest look at some of the stark realities that every city or community, even the ones already celebrated for a diverse culture, good education, the arts, parks, and strong local business, every community can benefit from this kind of discussion. Find us on Facebook to add your voice to the conversations. We're at facebook.com/Civil Society TV. And we will post links and information related to today's show at nonprofitaustin.org/civil society. I want to thank my guests for today, Dr. Burnett, Dr. Stephanie Hawley, and Tam Hawkins. I'm Julie Niehoff, and thank you for watching Civil Society.